Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to be here. So during my presentation, I would like to focus on how we can measure the patient-specific and daughter-specific pharmacokinetics in clinical routine. And here I would like to focus on the actinium PSMA treatment because that's where we have most of the experience with. I would like to focus on that topic because it's really the basis for patient-specific dosimetry. So normally when we want to measure the patient-specific pharmacokinetics in clinical routine, we do gamma camera examinations at multiple time points. However, as we have heard already, for actinium PSMA, the situation is quite challenging because due to the high biological effectiveness of actinium-225, we use a very low therapeutic amount, which is in the order of 8 megabecquerel. So in comparison to that, for lutetium PSMA treatment, we use a therapeutic activity of 7.4 gigabecquerel. So this is 1,000 times higher activity. And although, in fact, the gamma emission probabilities are comparable between lutetium and actinium, due to the low therapeutic activity for actinium, we have a very low signal that we can use for gamma camera imaging. Further, the upper photo peak of actinium-225 is at 440 kV, and this is out of the range of conventional gamma camera imaging. So here we have to reconsider the reconstruction algorithms that we are currently using. So on this slide, I would like to visualize the extreme scenario we have to deal with. So on the right, you can see a single projection of a NEMA phantom measurement that was carried out with lutetium 177. You can see the border of the phantom, and you can see nicely the hot sphere here. You can see here the same measurement carried out with actinium-225, and you immediately see that you do not see anything in that image. It's just kind of random noise. And the situation gets even more severe when we come to patient imaging. So here you can see the projection data acquired from a prostate cancer patient after receiving a cocktail of 1 gigabecquerel of lutetium PSMA INT and 8 megabecquerel of actinium PSMA INT. Here on the right, you can again see the lutetium emission projection. You can nicely see different structures in that projection, while the image quality in the actinium projection data here measured at 440 kV is really bad. Nonetheless, we can get a reasonable activity distribution out of that, and I'm still fascinated myself that that works. So here you can see the current clinical acquisition protocol that we use for the actinium-based treatment. So for PSMA and PRRT, we use a high-energy collimator, of course, as we want to image the 440 kV peak, but we also have some other high-energy gammas present in the spectrum, although at a lower probability. In fact, we measure 3.5 minutes per projection. That's quite a long acquisition time per projection, and we can only do that by really reducing the number of angular views that we acquire over 360 degrees. So we use 32 projections over 360 degrees. So in a normal setting, you would acquire 120 projections, for example. Nonetheless, the total acquisition time is 1 hour per single detector position. And this already puts some clinical challenges to that imaging protocol. So the field of view is really limited to 1 bed position. So meaning that for example, for prostate cancer patients receiving PSMA treatment, it's not possible to image the salivary glands and the kidneys in 1 imaging session, but both of them are normally considered as risk organs. You have to do good patient positioning so that the patients can really tolerate such a long acquisition time. The imaging is certainly not available for all patients at the moment or all therapy cycles. So at the moment, we only perform actinium imaging after the first therapy cycle. And late imaging may be especially challenging because we already start with a very low activity, and the activity is, of course, decreasing over time. As you will see during the course of my presentation, so far we only imaged until 48 hours post-injection, which is of course not good if you want to study, for example, a lesion pharmacokinetics. The quantitative reconstruction is carried out with our own in-house reconstruction software. There's already an intra-reconstruction filter included, but we normally apply additional post-filtering to really allow for sufficient noise suppression. We use that reconstruction software for lutetium already. However, for the actinium 225 imaging, we had to build in some modifications. So we switched the conventional resolution modeling to a 2D resolution modeling, and we adjusted the type of scatter correction from an energy window-based scatter correction to a transmission-dependent scatter correction. So first, coming to the resolution modeling. So normally when you model the detector response in SPECT reconstruction, you assume an isotropic detector response. That's a good assumption, for example, for lutetium. However, when you have to deal with high energy gammas, you see that you get that anisotropic star pattern, and this star pattern is coming from high energy gammas penetrating through the collimator septa. And this phantom measurement shall visualize the impact of using that 2D resolution modeling. So here we performed the high count phantom measurement with that cylindrical phantom, which contained 3 different sized inserts. So the largest one was 200 millimeter, imitating a typical kidney volume, and the smallest one was 20 milliliter. High count measurement means that we use the 30-fold higher activity concentration than what we expect in clinical routine. So we analyzed some lutetium PSMA data here and estimated 200 becquerel per milliliter to be expected activity concentration at 72 hours post-injection in risk organs. You can immediately see that for the 218 kV peak, this high count measurement was already a low count measurement, because you can see that the signal shape is very distorted and we do not really have a good signal intensity here. This is probably due to the fact that the emission probability for 218 kV is already a factor of 2 lower compared to 440 kV. Here you can see the 440 kV image with the conventional resolution modeling, and here you can see now the image with a 2D resolution modeling, and you can see that this 2D resolution modeling is really important to obtain a good signal shape and to obtain a good signal intensity. The next thing we adjusted was the type of scatter correction. So normally what you do on the clinic is you do energy window-based scatter correction, because you can just measure additional scatter projections along with your photo peak projection. However, so you may remember that actinium projection from the beginning with very low counts, this situation is even worse, of course, for the scatter projections. And as you may imagine, so using these projections during the reconstruction for scatter correction is likely to add additional noise to the images. So what we did, we switched to a model-based scatter correction or transmission-dependent scatter correction. So for that scatter correction, we estimate the scatter projection from the current image estimate that is convolved with a predefined scatter kernel. That approach was proposed by Solberg and colleagues already in 2008. And what we have seen is that this is especially important to get a good image quality at the 218 kV peak. So now you can see here some imaging of the 218 kV peak of a prostate cancer patient at 24 hours after injection with 8 megabecquerel of actinium PSMA INT. Here you can see the classical scatter correction, so using triple energy window scatter correction. Here you can see the model-based scatter correction, and here you can additionally see the pre-therapy PSMA PET-CT, which we can regard as a kind of diagnostic gold standard. And I think you can immediately recognize how the model-based scatter correction really improves the lesion detectability and also the signal intensity. And this image looks very comparable to the pre-therapy PSMA PET-CT. Here you can now see the whole imaging sequence for that patient. So the patient underwent SPECT-CT at 24 and 48 hours post-injection. And you can see all 3 photo peaks. And we can see that all images nicely correlate with the pre-therapy PSMA PET-CT. So direct patient imaging is doable, but it's challenging in clinical routine due to the long acquisition times. So in principle, theranostics also allows us to do some surrogate imaging. For example, you could use lutetium PSMA as a surrogate for actinium PSMA. So by doing surrogate imaging, you can gain knowledge about, of course, the target expression or the pharmacokinetics of the target vector itself. But this approach is limited if you expect the daughter-specific pharmacokinetics to deviate from the pharmacokinetics of the parent. So in that case, it would be advisable to combine at least the surrogate imaging maybe with one direct alpha image. Or you could also include in vivo sampling, so for example, urine sampling, to get knowledge about the daughter-specific pharmacokinetics. And as we have heard several times today already, so for actinium-225, the problem with the daughter-specific pharmacokinetics is especially important for the bismuth 213, because bismuth has a very or comparatively long half-life, and if the bound to the PSMA ligand breaks up somewhere before, bismuth has enough time to redistribute somewhere in the patient body. And we know that free bismuth accumulates in the kidneys. Of course, cell internalization here is an important parameter, because if the molecule is internalized into the cell before, that may prevent free daughters to leave the target site. However, in an in vitro experiment performed in a prostate cancer cell line with lutetium PSMA INT, we have observed that at 24 hours post-injection, still 50% of the activity that is taken up by the cells is present on the membrane. So, and if the first alpha decay happens on the cell surface, of course, bismuth is free to travel somewhere else in the patient body. In a patient cohort with combined lutetium and actinium PSMA treatment, we investigated the SUV mean and lesions and kidneys for the upper photo peak of actinium and the upper photo peak of lutetium at 24 hours. And what you can see here is that the SUV mean and the lesions and in the kidneys shows a strong and also significant correlation. But what we also observed is that the SUV mean for the bismuth is significantly higher in the kidneys, and this already indicates some accumulation of free bismuth in the kidney. We tried to validate that finding in a second patient cohort that received actinium treatment only. And for that patient cohort, we did 2 things. So we performed the sequential actinium SPECT imaging at 24 and 48 hours post-injection. And along with each SPECT acquisition, we additionally collected urine samples. And when you continuously measure that urine samples in a gamma counter until equilibrium is reached, you can trace back to the bismuth to actinium ratio at the time of sample collection. And referring to the bismuth to actinium ratio in the urine, we observed an increase of on average 10% of that ratio. And at 48 hours, we have a ratio which is higher than 1, meaning that we have excess of bismuth in the urine samples. And interestingly, this observed increase from 24 to 48 hours in the urine was also found in the image data when we compared the bismuth to francium renal SUV mean ratio. So here we have also an increase of approximately 10%. So analyzing the image data further, we found that the renal effective half-lives and SUVs show a significant correlation for bismuth and francium. However, the SUV and the renal effective half-lives are significantly higher for bismuth. So they correlate, but we have higher values for the bismuth. So now as you can see, so measuring the patient-specific and daughter-specific pharmacokinetics is possible. So, but now the question arises, how can we include that knowledge in patient-specific dosimetry? So for alpha emitters, dosimetry really requires the knowledge on the cellular and subcellular pharmacokinetics. However, our clinical imaging devices are limited to a resolution of millimeter to centimeter. So for actinium, I would say it's more centimeter range. So, and here we have to deal with the question, how can we combine that? So we have heard a nice presentation from Stig Palm already, who showed how this could be done for astatine, and I think we can learn a lot from that. And yeah, so this is still some future work we have to do. What we do at the moment is we calculate the absorbed dose on a macroscopic level, so meaning for a whole organ or a whole lesion, and we then multiply this with the relative biological effectiveness. However, here also the relative biological effectiveness is not perfectly defined. So this factor is certainly tissue specific. It's also specific maybe on the dose rate. So here we still have to put some knowledge in. So to conclude, the measurement of the patient-specific and daughter-specific pharmacokinetics is doable in a clinical routine, but currently we still have to do with long acquisition times, which limits the field of view that can be clinically acquired, and also the number of time points and the number of patients that can be imaged. Light imaging is particularly difficult. Light imaging is always difficult also for logistic reasons, but it's especially difficult in targeted alpha therapy due to the low activities. So we need to adapt the current reconstruction algorithm so that they can really deal with the low count regime, and especially also with the high energy gammas. And well, we can do surrogate imaging as part of theranostics, but we have to be very careful with the interpretation when we look at the daughter-specific pharmacokinetics. So now the next step is to connect the macro and the micro dosimetry and to think about which RBE values may be the most appropriate for the clinical setting. Thank you.